To answer your first question, why should solar professionals care? Because you don't have to just wait for the conferences to move business forward. Everyone thinks that they do. Everyone I talk to thinks that the only time anything is ever going to happen is at the conferences. But then you look at what those companies are doing and how they use LinkedIn, and they tend to just occasionally update their company page, and then they get a few reactions, and then they probably internally are like, it didn't work. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who's gotten 1.8 million impressions in the last year, it can work. But you have to be emotional. The more technical you are, the more dry you are, maybe people will respect you, but they're not going to be interested in your content. They're not going to follow along. They're not going to think about you.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our host Tim Montague bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. A lot of us energy professionals know that we should be good storytellers or great storytellers. If you work in B2B, whether you're in sales, marketing, engineering, finance, I think we all need to be good storytellers because we are on a journey as a species, and we are humans, and we evolved sitting around the campfire telling stories to one another. There was a time, right, when storytelling was everything. All of our knowledge came through stories. And so that is very integral to us as a species. But so today we're going to geek out on storytelling and social media, LinkedIn especially. My guest is Aaron Nichols. You might know him as the host of This Week in Solar, a lovely little podcast. And he is also a research and policy expert for Exact Solar based in Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Thank you very much. And for anyone who's listening, don't let the title fool you. I'm a marketing and sales guy 100%, but we made up research and policy specialist because I handle PR. And so journalists kept telling us, we don't want to talk to a marketing guy. And so we put up a little smokescreen with research and policy specialist.
Well, it's a good one. I like it.
Yeah.
I do. I like it. And these little angles matter. How you frame things matters. And this is relative to storytelling. And we were getting into it a little bit in the pre-show, some of the fundamentals. But before we get into storytelling, Aaron, what is your story and why are we talking about the solar industry?
Well, my journey in the solar industry started in Ecuador in 2021 when I met circus girls on the beach when I was surfing and I didn't know what to do with my life. That's that's the story I love telling everyone. It's 100% true.
And they recruited you into the industry, it sounds like.
They did, yeah. So I love telling this story, and I did end up in the solar industry after some circus girls recruited me to sell solar door to door. At the time, I was a burned out teacher. I was traveling to learn movements. I did a couple circus art camps myself. I spent a lot of time learning to surf. I did some yoga teacher trainings, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And about a month before I met these women, I had sat down and just thought about what I wanted the rest of my life to be about and just drawn out a bunch of Venn diagrams trying to figure out where I wanted to put the tremendous energy I have. And I ended up landing on renewable energy because it just solved so many it covered so many bases that I wanted to cover in my life. I wanted to wake up feeling good about the work I did. I didn't want to work for nonprofits or be a teacher again because I didn't want to struggle with money for the rest of my life. And I wanted to be able to reach the end of my life, sit in the rocking chair on my porch, and feel like I had done something that mattered. And had no idea how I was going to do it. And, I applied for some jobs back then that I was completely unqualified for. And then I met some women in the town that I was staying in, Ayampe, Ecuador, who would knock doors, sell solar. The company they worked for would go on what they called blitz trips, where they would fly them out. They would knock doors and sell solar to homeowners. And then they would take the money that they earned from that and then go do circus arts camps, which was their passion. And then they would run out of money and then they would come back and knock doors again. And they invited me on a couple of these trips and I was terrible at it and I didn't end up full time in the solar industry for another year after that, but that was the genesis.
And you speak Spanish well enough to door knock in Ecuador?
No, these were in the States.
Oh,
I do not speak Spanish well enough
the
to door knock in
the
Ecuador.
circus girls were American?
They were American, yeah, but there's a lot of like hippie encampments of Americans all throughout Southeast Asia and South and Central America,
Sure.
and a lot of people who are into fire spinning and circus arts in those places, and I hung out in a lot of those places when I was traveling down there, and that's where they found me.
For our California audience, how good is the surf in Ecuador?
I don't know because I can't compare it to California, but probably not as good as California, but it's still the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, I've never heard of it being a hot spot, but I'm also not a surfer. I tried surfing a little bit when I was in college. I went to school in San Diego. Some of the best
Mm,
surfing in the country.
yeah.
Black's Beach was just 20 minutes from my dorm room. It wasn't very good for my grades, let me tell you. So let's get into well, fast forward. You now work for Exact Solar, and you also have spooled up this news show. It's a news and interview show, to be fair, and on our industry. So, what compels you to be a content creator and storyteller, Aaron?
I believe that I have a big role to play in the energy transition. And that might sound crazy because I'm very new here, but I have this energy to write on LinkedIn and summarize news on This Week in Solar and, interview people in the industry because I'm very interested in this and I believe that I have a big role to play and that the intersection of my skill set and what I can offer is to package what we're doing and make it interesting, take the technical and bring it down to earth so that the public can be more interested in the energy transition.
Yeah, it is kind of exciting that everybody is freaking out about their energy bill right now, even though it's hard on low income people. And that is frustrating for me. But as energy professionals now, electricity is in the news every day because power prices are going up, sometimes dramatically. in some markets, and for the foreseeable future. We're now adding a lot of load to the grid with data centers and electrification of everything. And so it's a little bit of a perfect storm. And that's basically good for our industry. As prices go up, it means that solar pays back faster. And we like that. We have enough headwinds with the federal administration right now, so some tailwinds are a good thing. But I guess I'm curious, what is the story that solar installers need to tell better, in your opinion?
Individual stories are a great place to start. Last month, I published an article. I just put it on my LinkedIn. It's called 4 Rules of Storytelling That Corporate America Desperately Needs. And rule number 1 is tell one story at a time. I phrase it in the article as lead with one story.
Okay.
But the thing a lot of people get wrong, and one of the reasons that we got our butts kicked in the lead up to the One Big Beautiful Bill, is that people in the clean energy industry especially tend to be more left-leaning, which means they tend to have more advanced degrees, which means they've trained themselves to think in a certain way. And then the information they put out that's public-facing tends to be very highbrow. There's a culture where they're rewarded for overcomplicating things. They're not rewarded for simplifying things. Now, when we're talking about facing an opponent that has no trouble using emotional misinformation to push people in the other direction, we're talking about the fossil fuel industry, we can't afford to be that way. We can't afford to be boring, but we insist on being boring. And it drives me crazy. There's a book I really like called Making Numbers Count by Chip Heath and Carla Starr. I don't know if it's going to blur it out, but there's a ruler on the front. And
Making Numbers Count. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. I haven't heard of this book. What's it about?
So Making Numbers Count is about how we don't actually speak numbers, but we pretend to. And I'll bring it back to tell one story. But the human mind, like you said at the beginning, we have 200,000 plus years of sitting around campfires telling each other how to find the berries. And we have a couple hundred years of pretending that we understand really big numbers. One is much more powerful than the other because it's ingrained in us. Now, if we're talking about winning stories and how to tell winning stories in order to elicit emotional response that then gets people to take action, zooming in on one story is the way to go. There's a psychological study that's been done over and over again that shows that when problems feel really big, we tune out immediately, but when they feel small, we can take action. So this is why the Humane Society shows you one puppy at a time, not all 400 that they have in their kennels. They're offering you the chance to adopt one dog. And this is something that drove me so crazy when we were leading up to the One Big Beautiful Bill. We kept saying, we're going to lose 10,000 jobs if this legislation passes. We're going to lose 4 gigawatts of pending projects, which to the average person is just big number bad. What some people do masterfully, and I think a great example of this was last year in the New York Times in Georgia during the election where some public utility commissioners were dethroned and they got some fresh blood in there. They told the story of a single mother. She had voted for Trump, but she was approved for solar for all right before they pulled the funding. Georgia had some of the biggest power increases in the country, which meant that her energy bills were spiraling out of control. She was working 3 jobs, but she couldn't keep up. That story helped motivate that election in a way that's saying, if we don't dethrone the public utility commissioners, we're going to lose X number of jobs or power bills are going to go up by X%, never would have done. So tell one story at a time, connect what you want people to do to a face.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. It's when we hear about suffering, it makes more of an impact if we can put a face to the suffering, a specific face. And this isn't easy, but when it's done well, it is good. And so I concur. I think this presents a challenge for our industry because, in commercial solar, the world I travel in the most, Sure, we can tell a company story where, most companies, when they go solar, are happy to tell their story, so to speak, because it's a good story. It's good for their stakeholders, they're saving money, it's good for their employees, they're cleaning the air in the community. But when it comes down to the human story in C&I, sometimes I think it's hard to find that human story. And it is about the workers, it is about people's jobs in manufacturing plants. It's about, you know, the impact of lack of resilient infrastructure, right? We're sitting here today in January of 2026, and many people are going without power because of Winter Storm Fern that has really impacted Tennessee, for example. And maybe some people that I know, but I'm not aware of a specific individual that is suffering right now because of the outage in Tennessee. But telling that story, of course, is powerful. But how do you find your way, I guess, to those personal stories in an industry where it's not necessarily appropriate or accepted to tell that personal story?
Sure. I mean, not appropriate or accepted just means no one else is doing it, which just means opportunity to do it in a way no one else is doing. I think people often conflate the fact that no one else is doing it with the idea that there's no reason to put effort behind it, but that's not true. It's
So what's
just
a
that it's a
solar story? What's a solar story that you tell at Exact Solar that
yeah.
that motivates others to either become part of the solar tribe or
Mhm.
take action on policy or whatever that is?
Yeah, we've got a couple really amazing ones. And I mean, if we're talking commercial, there's a refrigeration warehouse that we put solar on that now saves hundreds of thousands of dollars per month and can put that towards better use. I think that's always a great story is we were wasting all this money on electricity before, and now we freed up budget to do things that aren't wasting money on electricity every month. There's the school that we've done a lot of work with nonprofits. So there's the school that we built a off-grid system that is battery backed. That's just a simple ground mount that powers a greenhouse on the school's property. It's in the middle of Philly, very close to the Kensington area. And it powers a hydroponic gardening system in a greenhouse that grows organic produce. And then the students harvest that produce and serve it to parents and staff in an on-site restaurant. And then they sell the extra at a farmer's market every month. Or there's the Habitat for Humanity row homes that we did as a commercial job, where we put them on the whole row of homes at once. And then all of the homes were donated to low income people in the community.
And so, but how do you go to that next layer down and tell the personal stories within those bigger stories? Those are, I would call those more traditional commercial solar stories.
Hmm.
How do you go to the next level and get permission to tell the story about the family benefiting from that garden project, or you
Hmm.
know, and I did have a couple of customers that came on the show. Historically, Colin Murphy stands out in this regard. He's the CEO of Simmons Knife and Saw in Chicagoland, and so I'm a big fan of that, of bringing it down to a personal level. But sometimes it's not easy to get to those stories. How do
Sure.
you get
Yeah.
to this, get to that, and then
The
let's
schools.
talk about the elements, I guess, of what makes a good story, because
Mhm.
that's also, I think, very important. Not only
Yeah.
like finding the story, but how we tell it.
The school's the best example that we were able to do such a great job with. So we brought it down to the community level and suggested the idea of a ribbon cutting when we put together, like when we finished the school project. We specifically focused on the man who had decided to do this at the school and got everyone organized around him and excited. And then we were able to put together his story and how he had like gotten this project across the finish line and done it in collaboration with a local nonprofit where the executive director had just died, and like his legacy was involved. Then we reached out to local politicians and we said, you guys are going to love being photographed in front of this solar energy system. There's kids in this story. There's organic produce in a food desert. There's all this stuff. And then we got politicians on board. And then we reached out to the reporters and we said, you guys are going to love photographing these politicians in front of this thing. It's beautiful. And they're going to be all excited that you're here. And so we zoomed in on the man who had gotten this across the finish line, and then we were able to loop in local organizations, build around that on that story, and then we got a lot of publicity after that. We got our congressman to come speak, who represents that local district. And then that story got us a relationship. So that story went live in quite a few local news publications. And then that story got us a relationship with a local NPR subsidiary reporter who introduced us to a national NPR reporter. That got us into a story that went live all over the country. So this is the power of a good story.
And let's break that down a little more, though. What is it that makes a good story that we humans are going to remember and resonate with and be moved by?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So rule one, like I said, is tell one story at a time or lead with one story. So bring it down to one thing at a time. As soon as you bury it in a statistic, no one cares. Statistics should be buried in stories. Stories should not be buried in statistics. Rule number two is make me care before you make your case. As people who are, like I said before, people who are in the renewable energy world tend to be left-leaning, which means they tend to have more advanced degrees. You have what's called like the educated middle of America. And those people tend to believe that they're logical. All of us believe that we're logical, but people who have advanced degrees tend to think of themselves as much more logical than the average person. And that means that they don't know generally how to like retreat back into the emotional world. And they try to lead with facts rather than leading with emotion. But people only accept facts when facts fit in a story they already believe. And facts matter in winning people over, but they're not in the entry point. So that's why you have to connect with people where their values are. And that's why every story we told in that greenhouse project was connecting with the values of people. We knew that politicians like to be photographed and like publicity. We knew that reporters like to photograph politicians. So that's rule number two. Make me care before you make your case.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. Okay. You know, I like being in the solar industry because it resonates with people from across the political spectrum. For one thing, energy independence is something that's very popular across the spectrum. Not being dependent on a grid operator, if that's possible. Wanting to save money. Every human on Earth wants to save money, whether they're rich or poor. People like to save money. And generally speaking, renewable energy gives us that power. Wanting a safer, healthier future, or present for that matter, okay? Everybody wants cleaner air and cleaner water and better health. And by cleaning the grid, we are actually doing this. We are saving lives. We are reducing suffering from disease that's caused by air pollution. And that's a public good. But you mentioned these two fundamentals. Are there others? How many fundamentals are there?
There's four. There's
Okay.
I called it the four rules of storytelling corporate America desperately needs. Rule number three is if it's complicated, you haven't finished thinking. And then in the article, I joke that there's way too many websites out there that say things like, we offer integrated end-to-end synergistic solutions that advance materials and advance technology. Like SAT words that sound nice but mean nothing. I like to
Keep
joke
it
too
simple,
that
stupid.
yeah, this is a line that always gets a laugh when I'm speaking on stage is I'll say, how many of you here have ever gotten in an argument with your spouse and then immediately showed them a graph to prove that you were right?
Mm,
And like one person will raise their hand, everybody else will laugh. I'll point at him and I'll say, and how did that go? They'll say terribly, and I'll say, obviously. But you think you can do that to strangers online and that they're going to be receptive. But
yeah.
so when I say if it's complicated, you haven't finished thinking, what I mean is what I said before, that like for technical professionals in an industry like energy, there's no culture of being rewarded for simplifying things. It's a culture of being rewarded for overcomplicating information. But the four steps I put in that story for simplifying or that in that article for simplifying things,
Yeah.
which like if you're sitting down to simplify the message of what your product does, is the example that I wrote, is just if you can answer the questions, what does our product do? How did we make it do that? Who has it helped by doing that thing? And why should anyone care? And then you can answer those below a fifth grade reading level. You are so much farther ahead than so many people in this industry.
And what's number four?
Put a face on it. This is specifically for LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn personal pages get an order of magnitude more engagement than company pages, but people insist on continuing to post on company pages, and they're so reluctant to embrace thought leadership because they're afraid their employees will leave. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, from my own content, that leaning into what we call thought leadership and putting a face on the beliefs of your company will get you so much more attention than a company page. Like no one in the world wakes up and says, I wonder what Bank of America is up to. We follow people. We're
Yeah.
interested in people.
Yeah. I agree. Well, let's talk more about LinkedIn. I was an early adopter. I have 23,000 connections on LinkedIn. I like networking on LinkedIn. I don't like any other social media platform particularly. I do occasionally post on other platforms, but I post regularly on LinkedIn. And it's a great way to grow your network. I can now I've gotten to a point, Aaron, where I can tell how involved and engaged someone is in the industry by how many contacts we share in common. And
Nice.
that's upwards of 2,000 people that I would share in common with a very established veteran in the industry. And it is always concerning to me, honestly, when I run into somebody who is in a position of authority in the industry who's very little connected, or we share very few mutual connections. And I'm curious also, and some people just are not on LinkedIn, and so that is a thing. They can be very established in the industry and actually connected without being connected on LinkedIn. But I digress. So tell us about your approach to LinkedIn. You're somebody who's very active and have, to some extent, cracked the code on getting people to pay attention to your content on LinkedIn. So why should solar professionals care about LinkedIn? And when you say thought leadership, what does that mean?
Yeah, good question. So, to answer your first question, why should solar professionals care? Because you don't have to just wait for the conferences to move business forward. Everyone thinks that they do. Everyone I talk to thinks that the only time anything is ever going to happen is at the conferences. But then you look at what those companies are doing and how they use LinkedIn, and they tend to just occasionally update their company page, and then they get a few reactions, and then they probably internally are like, it didn't work. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who's gotten 1.8 million impressions in the last year, it can work. But you have to be emotional. The more technical you are, the more dry you are, maybe people will respect you, but they're not going to be interested in your content. They're not going to follow along. They're not going to think about you.
Well, I have two immediate reactions to this, and
Yeah.
I think we should explore those. When I think of employees posting on behalf of an employer, or they see themselves as employees, okay, there's a couple of things going on. One, they don't necessarily want to outshine the company or the boss.
Mhm.
And I think that is a real specter for a lot of people. And then two, so there's a downside, there's a potential downside to being too visible on social media. Like, well, what are you doing if all you're doing is posting on LinkedIn, Tim? The flip side of that is, well, is anybody paying attention? And did you get any deals? Right? Like, at the end of the day, companies are trying to generate revenue, and that means deal flow. And so the question that you get asked is, well, how is it generating business?
Mhm.
How do you answer those two objections that these are individual people who would be posting, and maybe they are, but they're dealing with these things? How do you address that?
I can tell you what it's done for me, and we can go from there. If we're talking about business development, generating business, building relationships, not at major conferences, I have yet to be to a major conference. And there's a lot of people who talk about me in rooms I am not in companies I don't work for. In terms of business development, LinkedIn's pretty amazing because you can message anyone. It's not like Facebook where you are barred from messaging people that you don't connect with or follow or aren't friends with. Like you can send cold messages to anyone in any ICP. I have used LinkedIn to launch a podcast. I've used it to get myself much further along in the industry than I normally would be at someone who works at a regional solar installer and has only been here for 2.5 years. I've used it to connect with people like yourself to come on to This Week in Solar. I've used it to launch events in my local community where I invite people that I met on LinkedIn who are high up in the industry to speak at events to crowds of 40 to 70 local people who came because they were interested in my content. Now, I'm in a very specific situation where I work for a small company and no one is really that bothered what I do on my LinkedIn. So it has led to revenue locally by just allowing us to connect with some amazing partners and by bringing us attention through This Week in Solar and giving us a platform where we can connect with anyone we want and given us an amazing business development platform where I can connect with anyone who normally wouldn't talk to me and tell them that I have an audience and that they can come on my podcast. But I don't know if I have good answers for all of the questions that you asked. That's just what it's done for me.
It definitely resonates what you said about company pages versus individuals. And I do think this is a tragic mistake that companies make. They rely on their company page and they see that as the voice, right? And they want that to be the unified voice. And I'm like, nope. You
Yeah.
need the team to be posting and presenting thought leadership. We do business with people. Even though a company is this entity that we're also doing business with. We're doing business with people that we like and trust. And so that's kind of how I see LinkedIn, is a way to build like and trust and to offer valuable information. And not all of the information I'm offering on LinkedIn is going to be perceived as value. And thank God I'm also a podcaster, right? So I can present information about others that I'm bringing on the show, because ultimately that's probably the most valuable thing that I do, is bring their content to the show, to the airwaves, right? And I may have some interesting good ideas. Frankly, the best awakening that I've had, Aaron, is that the energy transition is important, but it's not solving the climate crisis. And we as an industry are in denial about this. And we need to stare that in the face. We need to look in the mirror and go, oh, crap. And there is actually some affordable, accessible solutions for that we should do in parallel. But so what else should people be thinking about when they think about LinkedIn? One other, I guess, flag that I struggle with is the personal journey aspects of some of LinkedIn. Like, I don't want LinkedIn to become Facebook. I like it that it is a B2B platform, right? I like it that it's about work and about industry and about the energy transition for me. And there's also all these personal journeys, but I don't want it to be Facebook.
Sure. I don't think it matters. I think the people who love it the most are going to bring their unique voice to it. And I can tell you that the two things that have gotten me the most attention and represent a large part of that 1.8 million impressions that I've gotten, including a post that by itself had almost 400,000, were either about me or funny. And those were the ones that got people laughing and interested and opened up discussions and got people to follow This Week in Solar and got them to tell me what an awesome job I'd done and how much they enjoy my content. Because I think an underrepresented thing on LinkedIn is personal stories. And if you're able to tie the personal stories of interesting people who work at your company to the values of your company, that's something that can get you a lot more attention. And it's something that is underrepresented. But all of my greatest posts are about camping with the woman who's now my wife, or proposing to her, or the wedding we did in the woods, or all of that stuff. It shows that I'm a person who has values. It also shows that I'm a person hopefully people would want to hang out with, and it represents Exact Solar well.
Yeah, I agree on some level. Okay. We do want to personalize the content. But I also don't want to wear all of my beliefs on my shirt sleeve on LinkedIn.
Sure. This is something that anyone who has a public-facing persona is myth-making. You are choosing the things that you want people to see about you. There's really only a small number of people who know you. And those,
Sure.
There's a core group of people who know you and love you deeply and actually know who you are. If you are presenting any kind of persona to the world on social media or otherwise, you're a myth maker, whether you like it or not. You're presenting some version of the truth. You're not presenting just the truth. But you choose what beliefs you want to be out in the world. You choose what you want to be out there and what you don't want to be out there. And that's the dance, and that's the fun part of it.
That is a lovely thing about social media in general. We get to choose both what we post and what we interact with.
Yeah.
So, in our last few minutes together, Aaron, I mean, we could talk about this all day. It is a fascinating subject, but I want to bring it. I want to bring it back for energy professionals who, let's just say, I mean, I break the world into ones, twos, and threes. The ones get it. The twos will get it with some education, and the threes are never going to get it. So for the ones and twos, okay, who get the importance of LinkedIn, say, and the importance of storytelling, how can we help them be even better?
Emotion. Lead with emotion and lead with emotional stories. This is another social science fact that I love is that facts decay in the mind faster than stories do. And I can prove that by telling you that I remember that story about the single mother in Georgia whose power bills went up out of control. And do not remember the amount of money her bills went up by. But the amount of money her bills went up by in the story, those were the facts. That was the hard stuff. Those were the numbers. I have no idea what that was, but I can remember that she was struggling, that she had kids, that she voted for Trump, that she was approved for Solar for All, that Solar for All funding was pulled, and that she was suffering as a result of that.
Yeah, it's very ironic that many people that supported Donald Trump are some of the most impacted people by uh, his administration.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
you're a student of history. You know that, I mean, the poor always suffer.
and it's the poor that suffer the most from climate change. And,
Mhm.
um, so that's a big one. Like I get it on some level why the elites in Washington aren't that concerned about climate change because they can drive away in their SUV or fly away in their private jet to some better place. But most people, ordinary people, just don't have that luxury, and
Right.
especially poor people.
But that's what I'm talking about here. This is the harnessing of emotion. Is when you talk about power, what is power? Power is meeting people where their values are at scale and convincing them that the thing that they should do is the thing you want them to do. That's what always happens in elections. That's what Donald Trump did so well. Um, and emotion unlocks that. But sharing graphs a bajillion times in a little echo chamber is not what unlocks action by the public.
So in our closing, Aaron, I have an important request. Tell
Yay.
us tell us a funny story about you.
Ooh, okay. When I was 16 years old, I had just gotten my driver's license and I had a little Mazda 626 that we paid my brother. We actually got it for $100. And we paid my brother an extra $100 to paint racing stripes on it with spray paint. So the whole thing was black with blue racing stripes. And one day, shortly after I had learned to drive, we were doing donuts in the snowy parking lot in Lyons High School, where I went to school, where my dad also happened to be a teacher. And I let my friend Ryan take the wheel, and he jumped my car off a snowbank in the school parking lot. And then we like did some donuts on the grassy front lawn of the school as well.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Parking lot was good, was safe territory, but
Yeah. This
front
is this
lawn.
is a sidebar, but this is you know how Facebook occasionally will just remind you, "Hey, you used to be in do you want to hear something dumb that you wrote years ago?" It was this same winter that I was just reminded a few months ago that almost 2 decades ago, I wrote a Facebook status that was like, some of that global warming I keep hearing about would be super nice right now because it was February and it was cold. And I was a teenager looking for attention. And I've obviously changed my perspective now. But anyway, so we're doing donuts in the snowy parking lot and on the lawn of the school. And then we go home. The next day, the school resource officer comes into school, sees that there's tire tracks on the school lawn, and goes and checks the security cameras. And of course, it's me. Uh, and I took it on the chin from my friends, and I told him that I was just doing that alone for no reason. And then that no one else was in the car with me. But my dad was obviously very angry, and so he pushed to make me do some community service, he and the school resource officer. And they wanted me to do community service with the janitor, who we had become good friends with. Her name was Mitzi. She was amazing. And me and my friend group had become good friends with her. She just really liked us. She would talk to us a lot. So I had to do community service with Mitzi. Mitzi thought the whole thing was hilarious and just made me mop in a circle a couple times just to be funny. And then she helped me steal a disco ball from the school.
Why did you want the disco ball?
Um, how could you even ask that, Tim? It was a
I guess
giant
everybody
disco
wants a
ball.
disco
But
ball.
of course everybody wants it. It hung in the garage for years, and my parents would always ask where it came from, and I was always evasive about it. So I was like, thrift store.
So Aaron gets busted for doing donuts and ends up with a disco ball. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Aaron, I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. I appreciate Jenna Dunn is the person who introduced us, really. I was doing
She's
a good
exact now. She's amazing.
I was doing a good job ignoring you on LinkedIn, but I would not ignore an introduction from Jenna Dunn. She's the real deal, and so thank you, Jenna Dunn, and thank you, Exact Solar, for letting Aaron tell his story on solar this week in solar every week. That's really cool. Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Tell a friend about the show. That's the best thing you can do to help others find this content. You can find it on YouTube, on audio, and at cleanpowerhour.com. I love to hear from my listeners, so reach out to me on LinkedIn. Aaron, how can our listeners find you?
You could find me on LinkedIn under Aaron Nichols. I wish I could say you could Google me, but there's an Aaron Nichols in Nashville, a country singer whose career is rising faster than mine. So just look on LinkedIn.
With that, I'll say, let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you, Tim.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more.